bond into a mob of reporters in Chicago yesterday after being charged with felony disorderly conduct. The judge giving Smollett a tongue lashing over the prosecutor's claims that he paid two men to attack him in what looked to be a racist and anti-gay hate crime, an alleged attempt to boost his career and his salary. Smollett also allegedly sent himself a racist threat in the mail. The case expected to have national implications. The Washington Post putting it this way in a headline over column: Jussie Smollett's alleged lies will bring great harm to innocent victims. In the meantime, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is taking aim at the media over its coverage of Smollett's explosive claims that he was the victim of hate in the city's streets. Listen.
I think the national media, I think national politicians, they need to take a step back. And they need to think about this moment, they need to think about other moments, and think about how we approach stories going forward. Because you and I know that the moment this was said, everybody rushed to judgment about the veracity of it. I hope one of the things that we all come out of this is learning that before we rush to judgment, we should take a pause, get the facts.
I mean, Brian, I'm getting whiplash when you sort of contrast this with the Me Too movement and stuff. It's sort of, now we're sort of being scolded for having rushed to believe when just a short time ago we were to believe everyone. I don't know. How do you see things?
Well, you know, the thing that's been lost in all of this is the honest pursuit of the truth. We live in a time, let's face it, we live in a time where people like to talk about my truth or your truth, but not the truth. And it's the truth that makes the difference here. And by the way, getting to the truth is the best way to protect real victims of real oppression, real injustice. If you don't do that, then the spotlight ends up on places like this or in ways like this that takes it off of people who really need help. So to me, there's actually maybe a silver lining here, and that is people who care about the truth now have the ability to ask that question again and not be pilloried for it.
Wow. You just dropped that mic. I mean, you are preaching right now. And I would hope that we give the same kind of concern and media coverage of the truth as we did as the alleged hoax.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem, is all the air gets sucked out of the room, and there are legitimate, honest, tough questions to ask. But a tough question is not insensitive. Yeah. A tough question is helpful to people.
Katie?
Harris, to your point, the police chief yesterday did say that. He said, look, I hope that the real facts of this case get just as much attention as the original allegations. And the truth is that the media has a lot more responsibility here than they want to take on. They set up an environment that allowed people to, or at least incentivized them to jump to conclusions about this. The media now has a bad habit of giving and assigning guilt or innocence based not on the facts, but on skin color and gender. And we need to take a step back and realize that in America, we are all judged or should be judged based on Lady Justice with the blindfold, not on your skin color, not on your gender, and based on the facts. And the truth is that they created a lot of other victims here as a result of his false claims. And while we've seen a lot of people be upset with Jussie for saying these things, you haven't seen a lot of retractions or apologies to the people that he smeared. And the president brought up yesterday that, look, MAGA supporters are the ones who were brought in the mud on all of this. The police chief didn't mention it, and a lot of these Hollywood celebrities and media haven't mentioned it either.
And you know who else hasn't mentioned it? A lot of the politicians that came out early. Let's listen to some of those as they circled back around and said, you know, what do you have to say now that it may not be the case? Listen.
The information's still coming out. I'm going to withhold until all the information actually comes out.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding.
Senator, can you tell us something about Jussie Smollett? What do you think about Jussie Smollett? Did you jump to the smoking gun defense too early? On the Smollett case?
What do you think, Jessica?
I think it's incredibly complicated. I think it's incredibly sad. We need to make sure that, first and foremost, that we continue to be a society that believes people and at least investigates what's happening. We're seeing this unfold as well in Virginia with the women who say that Justin Fairfax sexually assaulted them years ago. And I don't want to lose that thread. I think it's also important to continue to consider how much more likely a person of color in this country or minority would be a victim of a hate crime. The statistics are harrowing for the LGBTQ community, as well as people of color, which Jussie Smollett is a member of. So we need to keep that top of mind. There was a rush to judgment, but I read a really interesting piece that Dr. Jason Nichols, who's frequently on your show, wrote for Bustle about why the black community was right to believe Jussie Smollett, as well as Tawana Brawley, when that happened. And obviously, Reverend Al Sharpton played a key role in that. And the reason for that is because of how feasible it is that something like this could happen because of the way society is structured and the incidents of these crimes.
Can I just jump in there for a second? Because I know Dr. Nichols from Outnumbered Overtime, and he's, you know, always really interesting when he makes his points. I would say this. I'm a person of color who didn't jump to believe. I saw red flags from the beginning from a journalistic standpoint, which is different than sometimes looking at something and opening
and giving the benefit of the doubt was the argument
flowering
that he
your heart to a situation just because you share some categories of likeness. That's not what happened.
I'm not
that's
saying
not what happened with me and many other people who look like me, who happen to be in the business of journalism. We looked at this, and there were some inconsistencies. So I understand what you're saying, but opening your heart and understanding as a human being that others can go through things does not have to be mutually exclusive to the facts.
But that's the
and
point
waiting
that he
for them
was
to
making.
catch on before you call something as incendiary. Let me finish. As incendiary as a lynching. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. And yes, Cory Booker, both of them U.S. senators. Cory Booker walked it back a bit and said, well, I think I will wait for the I don't know who he thinks when you kill a tweet that you can't find that tweet. I don't know who, I don't know anybody on social media who thinks that you can put a cat back in a bag like that. It had certain categories, Jessica, that we have to be careful with because of where we are. If we're ever going to go forward, we do have to look at the facts and have an open heart. They are not mutually exclusive.
And I don't think that and they are going to struggle with this in having to walk back that kind of language. And we've talked about this before with Hakeem Jeffries saying the Grand Wizard of the KKK lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. My point is that I hope that we don't become a society that doesn't give the benefit of the doubt from the start, and that is opening up your heart and letting the facts of the case.
I don't think that we will. We're America. We help everybody all over the world. We're some of the most giving people on the planet, but we can't be blind to the facts. We got to be patient.
And we can't be judging an entire group of people, meaning Republicans, conservatives, people who voted for the president, of racism and white supremacy, which the media has done for 2 years. And now this case has blown it out of the water because he thought that this would be something he could get away with.
All right. We have some breaking news now. And it has to do with Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. After a press conference just moments ago in South Florida, Jupiter, police have confirmed, and I'm going to look here, he is accused of soliciting sex at a Jupiter day spa. Police say a months-long human trafficking investigation led to the arrest. And as, again, I said, Robert Kraft, his team just won the Super Bowl. New England Patriots, they have been watching him for some time. And as this story continues to develop with more details, we'll bring it to you. For now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is not ruling out a lawsuit against President Trump's emergency declaration for border wall funding. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the full House vote will be on Tuesday, and she's not ruling out a lawsuit against the order. Meanwhile, Wisconsin Congressman Mike Gallagher is becoming the first Republican House member to break with the president, telling a local NBC affiliate, quote, I think the president is right to emphasize the need for border security. I voted for the $5.7 billion. The problem is the president came to Congress asking for something Congress said no. Our system does not then allow the president to say, OK, I'm just going to go do it anyway through some sort of cheat code, end quote. Meanwhile, top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer is trying to drum up support for a similar resolution he plans to introduce in the GOP-led chamber, where it would face an uncertain future. GOP Senator Susan Collins says she will vote to block the president's declaration. And the Hill has identified 9 other Republicans as potential flippers and voting against the president's declaration. All this setting up a fight that could lead to the president's first ever veto. And that is because, Brian, I don't think any of it gives them a veto proof majority. Boy,
No, they're not going to have a veto-proof majority in the Senate. I do think, though, when I look at the House talking about this resolution, wanting to take back power that's rightfully Congress's, I say, where have you been on that for decades?
Yes.
You've been giving the executive power for decades to run everything. And by the way, Democrats in the House, you're talking about doing more of that with the Green New Deal. So now you want these constitutional checks and balances? Give me a break. I agree there's an issue there. You're just not the ones who should be making it.
No, I thought the exact same thing. I thought, yeah, go ahead and take back your power. And why don't you do some work while you're at it? Because in the past, you have voted in favor of $9 billion in barriers. Now, all of a sudden, you don't want to fund any of it. You're not for one single dollar. And before that, why don't they go ahead and fix the immigration system? I mean, I think all Americans can agree on whatever fault you see with it where it is, that it needs fixing, and they're the ones that haven't done the legislative work in order to fix that. So yes, take back the power and get to work.
Yeah. That is a magic four-letter word. Work.
Work it.
Work.
Work it out. I think Democrats are actually setting themselves up for a problem here, because you've heard with the president's national emergency declaration, Democrats say, well, then we're going to be able to declare a national emergency on climate change and gun control and all these things. But they're about to go on record saying that the president can't or shouldn't do it and take back the power. So in the future, if a Democrat president decides to do something like this, they've already put themselves on record on a House and Senate vote saying that this is something that the president should be doing in the first place. And the thing is to Melissa's point, and we talked about this yesterday as well, you know, the president, even when it gets to his desk as a veto, he's still not going to have any kind of real legislation to sign when it comes to solving the problem of border security. And he can still look at Congress and go, oh, that's great. I'm glad that you've condemned my national emergency. What are you doing about thousands of people flowing over the border every single week?
So, Jessica, before I come to you, let's watch Republican Congressman Nunes reacting to House Democrats' push to block the president's national emergency declaration.
I don't think I make much of it. This is just more politics. It's going to be interesting to see if the Democrats actually put the votes on the board. I have a funny feeling that they won't get all of the Democrats to vote for it. There'll be a lot who actually do want border security in this country, and you'll get virtually no Republicans.
Jessica?
Well, Devin Nunes isn't one of our top advisors, and I would say that he's not going to be hired from that soundbite because Democrats will vote against this. The difference between this national emergency declaration and what might come in the past or what has been before is how the cash is being appropriated. President Trump wants to take money from other areas, and I think that if the Democrats were to make a case about climate change or gun violence, they would have better statistics to back that up. The president also, and we all caught it when he was giving that emergency declaration press conference, said, I didn't need to do this. But he admitted in the preamble that it was unnecessary, and he's had over 2 years to do this, and he didn't move on it. So the Democrats have a very strong case here. That's what, is it 16 states that are already suing him about it?
There are 16 so far.
And they're using his language against him, and for good reason.
Brian, first of all, let's just step back, because we haven't really spent much time on what the president said, and those words are still hanging in the air like a thought balloon. What's your thought on it?
Well, look, I think it's funny that we're sitting here parsing the president's words so closely and somehow assuming that that's what this thing tips on. The issue tips on, exactly to your point earlier, has anybody in Congress done the work needed to get something done on immigration? And the answer is no. And when you look at
Why
this
didn't Republicans get it done?
Because
and don't talk to me about a 60 vote majority. I just mean putting something up that they would even put to the floor. You know what I'm trying to say.
Well, they didn't get it done last spring because there were midterm elections coming, and Republicans didn't want to take tough votes and fight out a wall with an election coming. And then they lost the election anyway and put the president in a very difficult spot in December before the House was turned over to Democrats. And Republicans for decades have also been responsible for this ongoing crisis at the border. It's not just Trump. It's not just Obama. It's not just George W. Bush. It's been going on for a very long time. And here's a president trying to stop the new crisis with Central Americans, and he doesn't seem to be getting any support. So Republicans have a lot of responsibility here, but the reason they didn't get it done over the first 2 years is because they didn't want to take the political risk with the midterm elections.
And it takes two to tango here as well. And the fact is they've not had a partner in this. They've not played the ball the right way, but Democrats haven't been a partner in this.
Yeah, they're open borders.
And so as a result, you get nothing done. And so the president looks at that and says, says, this is an emergency. Congress, you gave me the ability to declare this national emergency. I'm going to do it, and let's see what happens. That's action.
The facts don't bear it out.
In the meantime, one of President Trump's most vocal critics, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, penning an open letter in the Washington Post yesterday urging his Republican colleagues to go public with private concerns they might have with the president, especially his national emergency declaration to build the wall. Writing, quote, "When the president attacked the independence of the Justice Department by intervening in a case in which he is implicated, you did not speak out. When he attacked the press as an enemy of the people, you again were silent. And now he comes for Congress, seeking to strip it of its greatest power, that of the purse. And you have chosen to keep your misgivings and your rising alarm private. That must end. You must speak out." Katie, I love this. Your rising alarm private.
Your concern, your ongoing concern, I don't trust Adam Schiff at all. I'm sure there are some Republicans, as we've seen on the record, actually, who say, look, we don't like this national emergency. Mike Lee, who is a constitutionalist, has said it's unconstitutional, but it's illegal because of the way that Congress has ceded their power to the executive branch for years and years and years. There are Republicans who are publicly saying, look, we don't like the way that the executive branch has been abused. But for Adam Schiff to think that Republicans on Capitol Hill are going to be allies with him after everything that he has done and plans to do, I think that he's hoping for a little too much.
Jessica, I always think it's rich when they say, you know, in private, they've bemoaned his lack of decency, character, and integrity. These are politicians.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just sort of, I don't think of them as leaders in character and integrity.
Oh, that's sad.
But it's true. I mean...
Well, the American public agrees, even if they do think that Donald Trump's character is a little bit worse necessarily than your average politician, but millions of people went to the polls in 2016 and said, I don't care about his character. I don't care how he treats his wives or women or whatever it is, but I like conservative justice on the Supreme Court and I want a tax cut. And these people have gotten, the Republicans in Congress have largely gotten an agenda in line with Republican priorities. The national emergency is a bit of an outlier there, but the idea that Adam Schiff is going to be getting them to come out of the wings on this one is rich. But Senate Republicans, I think, are doing their job here. We already have 9 that are saying we're not going for this, which is going to halt it in its tracks. And
Brian?
There have been a ton of cases where Republicans have come out and said, I don't like what the president's doing, number one. So this is factually incorrect. But number 2, this is the common strategy that Schiff and others like to use. Oh, beneath the surface, there's all sorts of rancor. There's all sorts of discord, and it's just ready to pop. And man, is it going to be ugly. He's done that for years now, and he's doing it again, assuming that Republicans aren't on board by and large with the president. I don't think the strategy works, but he sticks with it, and it's clearly something that he's doing repeatedly.
It's also interesting because, you know, as he says, there's all this grumbling behind the scenes. Maybe there is, because this president is about upsetting the status quo and the swamp and the entrenched interests. And Republicans are just as guilty as Democrats as being part of the swamp and part of the establishment and the entrenched interests that he was set to upset, right?
You know, we mentioned earlier that Nancy Pelosi is moving the case for this. It's the big full vote's going to happen on Tuesday. We learned that from a short presser a time ago. And here's what else she said. The promise was Mexico was going to pay for it. Declaring a national emergency to honor an applause line is dishonoring the Constitution. Quote, he is dishonoring the office in which he serves, end quote. Brian?
Look, he's got a problem. We've got a problem as a country. He's taking the step available to him to do it. Whether it ends up being constitutional is a question that we will deal with. But I just think it's rich. Nancy Pelosi here leveling this claim and Adam Schiff leveling it. By the way, who was not supposed to be Speaker of the House? Nancy Pelosi was not supposed to be Speaker of the House because Democrats, the disgruntled Democrats, were supposed to rise up and find new leadership. Where are those hidden voices rising up to make it?
They're not on the forehead with that virtual gavel she carries.
We were promised a wave.
No,
what we got was a whimper.
In conservative media, you were promised that. You got a huge wave, actually, and now we have a new election in North Carolina because the Republican did ballot tampering and all that jazz. So it was absolutely a wave. If you look at the historical trends, it's bigger than what past presidents had gotten, and Nancy Pelosi is the right person to be leading, and that's why 5 or 6 of those that did dissent against her are now on board with her.
She's leading because she's very good at
We gotta go.
down.
They're yelling at me. The billboard battle intensifies between conservative advocacy group and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The group accusing her of costing New York City thousands of jobs by opposing the Amazon headquarter deal. Who's winning this battle among voters? Plus, President Trump gearing up for a second summit with Kim Jong-un, as some Democrats say they've been left out of the loop. So should the White House be more open about its North Korea strategy when it comes to Congress? We'll debate. Police told reporters on Friday that he hasn't been arrested, that a warrant will be issued, and his attorneys will be notified. This is all part of a larger crackdown in that area, in the Palm Beach area, on sex trafficking and human trafficking. About 200 warrants have been issued recently in that area based on this ring and what has been going on down there. But again, the spokesperson for Bob Kraft categorically denying that Mr. Kraft engaged in any illegal activity. And because it's a judicial matter, they will not be commenting any further. We'll keep you up to date on that story as more breaks.
And now this President Trump is scheduled to depart for Vietnam on Monday ahead of a highly anticipated second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The two men are set to meet Wednesday and Thursday in Hanoi to further discuss North Korea's denuclearization. This is a trio of leading House Democrats who are accusing the Trump administration of withholding information from them and demanding a briefing on the first summit. They also went after the president's assessment of North Korea, saying it does not line up with analysis by intelligence leaders. Part of their letter to the president reads this way, quote, "We are perplexed and troubled by the growing disconnect between the intelligence community's assessment and your administration's statements about Kim Jong-un's actions, commitments, and intentions. Furthermore, our ability to conduct oversight of U.S. policy toward North Korea on behalf of the American people has been inappropriately curtailed by your administration's unwillingness to share information with Congress," end quote. Meanwhile, Politico is reporting several of the president's top advisors are concerned the second summit with Kim Jong-un may not produce major results, or that President Trump could give up too much and get nothing in return. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says just getting North Korea to the negotiating table is an accomplishment no administration could achieve. Watch it.
I think that the only one setting high expectations is probably the media, because they're looking for reasons to attack this president. They hate the idea that he's done so well on something his predecessors couldn't do anything on. He's had a great success here in the fact that they were able to even sit down at the table. The fact he's able to do it again is in itself a big success.
So, Brian, I want to talk with you about what we have gotten out of this. People returned. I mean, can we just go down the road of what has happened positively?
Well, I think, and one of the biggest things we've gotten out of this is we've seen a cease to the testing that we were so concerned about before this whole process started. I mean, that's a big deal. Remember back to the conversations we were having before this diplomatic process started in earnest. We were so concerned about the repeated tests coming out of North Korea. We haven't seen that. Have we gotten all the way there yet? Have we realized all of our hopes? No, but I think it's so disingenuous that the critique here is, oh my goodness, this might not be great. This might not be awesome.
Sending up missiles or actually denuclearizing, because they haven't taken any steps to thwart their program. You just mean that missiles
I'm talking
are not
about
being...
the conversations regarding testing missiles that could reach areas we don't want them to reach.
Okay, so
and to your point, though, Jessica, because I have talked with military leadership about this, and even Kellyanne Conway, senior advisor to the president, about what it is that denuclearization looks like. You know, are we even on the same page? And that is a sticking point. That is some place that we still need to get to. The big decision is, do you want to get there and have a conversation via letters and over phones, or do you want to do it face to face? And that is a difference in ideology, and it's a difference in how you view a carrot and a stick. Katie?
Well, look, the criticism of the president was that he wasn't using enough diplomatic resources to have these conversations. And then he said, well, I'll be the top diplomat and go meet with Kim Jong-un in Singapore and get this thing started so we can cut out the middlemen that have been negotiating this thing for 20 years and don't seem to be getting anywhere. there. So this next summit in Vietnam will be very similar to the one in Singapore. The White House says that it's going to be about breaking the ice and the president going in and having a conversation with Kim Jong-un and saying, this is what your country could look like if you decided to comply and follow through with the promise that you've made to denuclearize. This is the future that North Korea could have. You'll have a good future there. The people will have a good future there. And the president was criticized this week for saying, we're not in a hurry, right? Not putting a timeline on this. Eventually, the White House is saying there will be a timeline, but for now, they're giving them these incentives to see how much they're going to comply with while they have stopped their testing.
I'll tell you who likes this. Let's pop up that Fox News poll. A growing number of registered voters who took the survey say they approve President Trump's handling of North Korea. 46% now give it their stamp of approval, marking a new high. Melissa?
Yeah, and I think when you go back to sort of the different approach to things, this is one of the areas where we see how different the president is from presidents in the past. And, you know, coming from a business background myself, a CEO always goes face to face. I mean, you don't expect anything to get done without walking in the door, looking in the eyes of the other person and having the conversation. In diplomatic circles, you work up to that they don't get the honor of sitting down across the table from the guy in charge until you get to a certain point. We'll see in the end which ends up being more successful, but you wouldn't dream of not going in person and having the conversation.
So here's my follow-up to you, because we know that we have a CEO passed with this president. So is there power in getting up, as the president has said, and walking away rather than having that message carry via several different people?
Having the message that you expect.
I mean, if you want to get up,
right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, to get up and walk away from the table. Right. Yeah, it is much more powerful. And Lindsey Graham was making the point earlier today on the network that they believe him. They're afraid of this president, you know, whether you're talking about North Korea or you're talking about enemies, you know, in Islamic circles. They understand that this president means what he says. And maybe when you're sitting across from him at the table, you're right. That stand up and walk out means something more.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add one thing quickly? I think this really comes down to who you see this as a coup for. The White House wants this to be a coup for President Trump, that he has gotten Kim Jong-un to the table twice to do this.
I don't think it's a coup for anybody.
Well, there's a power struggle going on here, and Kim Jong-un definitely thinks that he's in the power position because he gets the president to come over there.
If we stop their nuclearization, right? That's a coup for everybody around the world.
A win for the world.
All right, let's move on. More than 2 weeks since two women have accused Virginia's lieutenant governor of sexual assault, and so far, no investigation
before the Virginia State Assembly wraps up its session. Representatives for Vanessa Tyson blasting politicians on both sides of the aisle in a statement reading, the Virginia General Assembly has remained silent and has taken no action whatsoever in response to her allegations, even after a second woman, Meredith Watson, came forward. While lawmakers in both parties have responded with words of concern, they have utterly failed to act. It's been nearly 3 weeks since both Fairfax accusers, Vanessa Tyson and Meredith Watson, came forward with their allegations, and still no investigation. Democratic Party leaders, including 2020 presidential candidates Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Elizabeth Warren, have called on Fairfax to resign. And in the meantime, Democratic Governor Ralph Northam not faring so well at the outside of his so-called apology tour 3 weeks after his blackface scandal erupted. Virginia Union University, an historically black institution in Richmond, announced Northam would attend a faith, identity, and social justice conversation with students earlier in the week, but the president of the student body writing a letter asking Northam not to come. He will instead host an event at the State House. So first, Jessica, I want to go to you on these sexual assault allegations. The Democrats in Virginia have called for Justin Fairfax to step down for an investigation to be launched. But what is your take on the current situation with the Democratic Party in Virginia?
Well, I can't believe that it's been a couple weeks already. I mean, everyone was pretty unanimous that all of these people, not Mark Herring, the AG, but Northam and Fairfax had to go, and that it was the right way for an investigation to roll out without Fairfax in office. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure if this is some sort of protection mechanism, like if we wait them out, then maybe we can get away with this. But Vanessa Tyson is completely correct to be bringing this up again and putting it back in our consciousness. Going back to our first segment about Jussie Smollett and the media here, the cycle is so packed with news. And we even had this week, Christopher Hassan, the domestic terrorist that was working at the Coast Guard. We have reports constantly going on that I think people take what's right in front of them, and these stories can be missed. And certainly in the era of Me Too, this is not one that should be missed.
So, Melissa, the attorneys for Dr. Tyson are saying that Justin Fairfax is being disingenuous when he asked for an FBI investigation because they don't have jurisdiction. They're also saying that the county district attorney in Virginia hasn't reached out to do that investigation. So it seems like they're pretty frustrated with the lack of action as a result of the accusations.
No, I mean, it's amazing. It does seem like, folks that are involved are thinking that they can just wait it out. And the news cycle does move so fast. I wonder if that's true. I mean, I wonder if they can just kind of hang on by the virtue of time. That would be really unfortunate, because it means, for anybody who wants justice, you have to not only speak up, you have to continue to speak up over and over and over and over again until, somebody finally investigates if those who you are accusing, try to just wait it out.
I think to some degree that's always been true, though. Right? In terms of victims speaking up and having to keep things in the forefront, both in their own personal advocacy with the investigators, but also in the public eye. I thought, though, Brian, that we were going down a course where Suffolk County, Massachusetts, I believe, was going to be talking with one of the victims. They would have their own docket and timetable, so it's going to come up again anyway if, in fact, they follow through on
I do want to get this in before, and then I'll get you in. NBC is reporting, this is not our reporting, but this is out there, that the Virginia Assembly is now asking and inviting Justin Fairfax and Dr. Tyson to come and testify about the situation and the allegations. So, Brian, back to you.
Good. I think that's what should be happening. And the question is, why wasn't it happening? It seemed like a double standard. To this point about having to keep your story in the news, though, Smollett didn't have to work that hard to keep it in the news.
No.
It was there. And
he had senators tweeting about it.
But that's my point, is some people don't have, depending on how the issue is framed, sometimes an alleged victim doesn't have to work that hard. But that's to the detriment, again, of the potential real victims.
Right. I want to get to the second part of this segment, which is Ralph Northam Harris, the governor of Virginia, going on this apology tour and getting some pushback about what his intentions are and whether or not he should be going around to black audiences and trying to explain to them his situation.
Because when we first learned about blackface, and we're not sure whether or not he was wearing the hood or if he was in the blackface, we don't really know. When all those things first came up, and then he said, well, I did, and it was really thick shoe polish that I used to use. It's like that military. And then he told us how to do it. I mean, there were a lot of things with that. And then you're going on an apology tour. And he'd already apologized and then took back the apology because he said, well, that wasn't actually me.
Right.
And if it was, again, it's not clear if I'm in the shoe polish or the hood.
Right.
I mean, this has gotten so far afield from, is this what you want your leadership to look like in the Commonwealth of Virginia? And Melissa brings up an excellent point. If you can wait it out and get far afield from the actual critical issues, can you win that PR? I don't know.
We'll just have to wait and see. All right, moving on. A conservative advocacy group.
A conservative advocacy group hitting back at New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with 2 new billboards in Times Square. The new signs, which are gone now, poked fun at the freshman lawmaker for her tweet questioning the $4,000 price tag of the group's first billboard. That sign accused Ocasio-Cortez of costing New York City thousands of jobs and billions in annual wages by opposing Amazon's deal to build a headquarters in her district in Queens. Amazon eventually scuttled those plans. So billboards, which I found kind of funny, but I do think, and we should note, there are a lot of Democrats that are upset about this. Carolyn Maloney, Gregory Meeks. This is not something not a Dem versus Republican issue. But I tend to think, Brian, when conservatives come after AOC, she always comes out stronger.
This is.
I don't know about that.
Okay, let's put it this way. Whether or not she comes out stronger, it gives her an opportunity to come out with something.
Right.
And her supporters view it as strength. This is oxygen in her world. If you really want to make a difference with her, you don't give her an opening like this. You go after the policy and those who might be interested in pursuing it in other ways. But this is really just an invitation for her to get tons of the press she loves.
That's brilliant what you just said, because, she's still a newcomer. So what does she want? She wants that oxygen in the room so that she can speak. And I'm not all convinced that it really hurts her as much as other people think, because she is speaking with a bully pulpit at that moment.
And she's a fighter. I mean, that's her reputation as a fighter, and somebody has just punched. Now she gets to counter punch. And even if you disagree with her, and if you disagree with her, you're probably not going to pay attention to this, but if you agree with her, you're going to say, yes, that's the fighter I love.
See, I disagree with that, because I think that every time she opens her mouth on this particular issue, what immediately follows is you cost New York people, you know, $4 billion in lost salaries. That you can talk about whatever the tax implications were for the company of Amazon, but you called these jobs scraps that were an average of $150,000 per person. And I think every time you bring this up, the billboard, they put it out there, and if you look at it, it says, you know, this billboard cost $4,000. You cost $4 billion in annual lost wages, 25,000 jobs. Like, when you just put up those numbers, and she exposes herself to be ignorant on the numbers, to not understand that those were good jobs for her constituents, and it just brings, I think, in this particular issue, every time it comes back up, it hurts her.
It reminds me of Crumbs from
yeah,
Nancy
Crumbs.
Pelosi.
It is. Yeah,
Mayhaps worse than Crumbs.
Worse.
Katie, so AOC, I think it was 16,000 people that voted in the primary that got her ahead of Joe Crowley. Do you think they are bothered by what happened, or do they see her as a fighter for them and for Queens and the Bronx?
Well, I've talked to a couple of people who actually live in her district, and they're pretty upset about it. They weren't planning on working at Amazon, but they were hoping for some gentrification, for new businesses to come in, for their real estate prices as owners to go up.
Yeah.
So there are all these, you know, these outside consequences to Amazon leaving. And I agree with Melissa on this specific issue. You have to hold her accountable for her actions and realize these other big federal programs that she's pushing on the rest of the country will have the same or worse consequences as Amazon pulling out of New York. At the same time, I feel like giving her all of this attention does feed the beast in you know, profiling all of the things that she's saying that actually
Developing right now, Fox News alert, we are awaiting President Trump's meeting with the Chinese vice premier at the White House this next hour. The president is sitting down with him to strike a deal to end a long-running trade dispute between the world's two largest economies. I'm Harris Faulkner on this Friday. Let's go outnumbered overtime. High-level talks going on as both sides try to reach that agreement ahead of a March 1st deadline that could see tariffs increased on Chinese imports from 10 to 25%. The pressure is on. This Wall Street Journal headline caught our eye. U.S. bets on China's special envoy in trade talks. The article begins, quote, as U.S.-China trade talks reach a pivotal point, the president's administration is counting on the Chinese leader's special envoy, Liu Hu, to get Beijing to accept tough new structures that are increasingly controversial in Beijing. Rich Edson from the White House lawn now. Rich?
Good afternoon, Harris. And the U.S. and China are trying to avoid a major escalation in this trade fight, and they've got about a week to do it. Chinese and American negotiators discussing this here in downtown Washington. In about 90 minutes, the president is scheduled to meet with the top trade negotiator, the Chinese vice premier, in the Oval Office. They had previously met in the latter part of last month after the latest rounds of negotiations. President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have set a March 1st deadline to resolve these trade issues before the U.S. raises tariffs on $200 billion in Chinese imports. The president, though, has indicated that deadline could slide, especially if the two sides are moving closer to an agreement. The United States is trying to narrow the $380 billion annual trade imbalance with China and wants the Chinese government to curb subsidies of their domestic companies and to stop stealing American trade secrets. The Wall Street Journal reports Chinese negotiators have offered to stop providing subsidies, though they have yet to provide a list of the subsidies they would eliminate. The Journal also reports China has focused its pitch on buying more American agriculture. A major part of these negotiations is ensuring the two sides can enforce any agreement. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told the Fox Business Network that China has failed to honor previous commitments on cyber and other issues, and that the United States will not fall into those same pitfalls again. The U.S. and China are also at odds over the Chinese telecom company Huawei, with the Secretary of State reminding other countries and pressing other countries to avoid using Huawei technologies because of the U.S. claims that there are security concerns in doing so. Harris?
Rich Edson, thank you very much. I want to bring in Chief Political Anchor Bret Baier now, Special Report Anchor and Executive Editor. Bret, good to see you today.
Hey,
you know, for this current president, relationships mean so much. With China's president, what is the status on the connection between these two men?
Well, the President Trump speaks all the time about a relationship he's established with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Refers back to their meeting in Mar-a-Lago, suggests that there is going to be another one to come, where he says, you know, he loads a lot of respect onto President Xi. This special envoy, Mr.